You're with On Track, talkSPORT's motorsport show, available on talkSPORT 2, the talkSPORT podcast network, and of course the talkSPORT driving YouTube channel. John Jackson here, alongside Racing News 365's Nick Golding. And this season we've travelled a lot with the Formula E World Championship. We've got live commentary coming up on talkSPORT of the next couple of rounds. We've got Jakarta a week on Saturday, and then we've got the doubleheader in Berlin a little bit later before we then go to London for the finale, the doubleheader finale weekend in July. I have a feeling that Oliver Rowland at Nissan will have wrapped up the Drivers' Championship by then, a massive points lead at the moment. And actually, he's going to have a new teammate at Berlin. Their reserve driver, Sergio Sette Camara, who you might remember has driven in Formula E a few times. He was with ERT most recently. He will be stepping in for Norman Nato for the Berlin E-Prix while it clashes with the World Endurance Championship. So a big opportunity for a driver that was certainly very impressive in his junior career. Sergio Sette Camara will be alongside Oliver Rowland at Nissan Formula E team. We've talked about the Formula One calendar already on the show today. The new Formula E calendar for 2026, again, way ahead of myself, has dropped as well. It does start in 2025, but I'm going to refer to it as the 2026 calendar. And we kind of not got many surprises, Nick, but there is some intriguing things on there. Most notably, we're going to Spain, which is fantastic because I feel like Spain as a country Formula E should be racing in. And we're racing at a track that we weren't expecting to see a Formula E car at maybe a year ago. And then we ended up seeing a Formula E car, well, quite a few Formula E cars there for testing last year.
Yeah, you're right. We are going to the, and apologies for my Spanish, the Circuito del Jarama. Don't know if that's right or wrong. Apologies if it's wrong. But anyways, yes, but we're off to Jarama, which is actually just north of Madrid. I don't know why I chose this, but anyways, we obviously are going yet to Jarama, which is just north of Madrid. And of course, if you remember, last year, pre-season testing ahead of this current season was moved from Valencia to Jarama. Very last minute, and an amazing job by Formula E to move it in the space of a few days due to what was devastating floods and weather in Valencia. And of course, it resulted in so much damage to both the city, to the circuit. And of course, as a result, Formula E pre-season testing just simply could not take place there. Jarama opened their arms to Formula E, took everybody in, did an amazing job. And yeah, we're now going to be racing there, which is interesting because it's a permanent circuit, but obviously it's a very, very old school one. It's probably got, maybe the oldest track surface on calendar. Who knows? That's probably a safe bet, I'd imagine. It's an interesting one because massive curbs, some really cool elevation changes. I think the drivers will enjoy it, particularly in qualifying. The race will be interesting. We saw a fairly good kind of practice race ahead of the season in pre-season testing. So time will tell. That's kind of my saying this year because it's good to have F1 back in Spain as a race. That hasn't happened since Valencia hosted a race back in 2021. So that's a real positive and a real boost to the series, which obviously is really keen to, race in Spain for the next years to come, whether that be staying in Jarama in the coming years or maybe moving to, for example, Barcelona, who knows? But yeah, Jarama, here we go.
I have a feeling it will be a short-term fix, and the race is one of the publications that's reported this, and I think you probably share that at Racing News 365, that with Cupra being involved, and certainly with Cupra having a big kind of team of investors behind it, they're based in Barcelona, this kind of Spanish arm of the Volkswagen group. There is some pressure that maybe they'd like to race in Barcelona, and we see Cupra actually sponsoring all kinds of stuff. I was watching a thing on ITV the other day, and it was sponsored by Cupra, so they're certainly getting their name around, so you'd imagine they would want to race in their home city. The other big one is that we will return, and this is with an asterisk next to it, to the Miami International Autodrome. This is obviously where where Formula E went for a promotional kind of round of activities, which wasn't a race earlier this year. And I think the feedback from that and the feedback from, Homestead was that the Evo Sessions track is probably a much better fit for Formula E going forward. Not only is it a lot nearer to the centre of Miami, but, it does have the heritage of being the abbreviated version of the F1 circuit. And I think it's just drivers prefer that track because, the track at Homestead was an oval infield track, which maybe wasn't the best and did produce quite a confusing result in the end. So that is happening, but it's happening on the 31st of January. What do you make of that? It's kind of early to be going off to Miami. It's not quite the summer weather we were hoping for.
Well, I've never been to America in January of all. Have you? Can you give a report?
Yes, many times.
What's the weather like?
I've been for the Super Bowl many times, and I've also been for things like the WWE Royal Rumble because I'm very cool. And it's hit and miss. Florida in January, I've been over there. We've had some torrential rain. We've had temperatures are generally all right. It's never kind of freezing cold. It drops off a lot in the evening, the temperature. But when in theory this race is going on, it should be warm-ish. But, we're not talking Jeddah warmth. We're not talking humidity from Jakarta. We're talking kind of fine. But I think that was probably the compromise that they had to make, because I think having an NFL team playing, obviously, at the Hard Rock Stadium, having the F1 there a little bit later in the year, I guess they had to fit in somewhere. And I think the compromise was that it's maybe not the most prime time of the year. However, it's still going to be a fantastic race there. I was lucky enough to be taken around that track in the safety car with Bruno, and it was pretty enjoyable actually. There's a few sort of minor elevation changes there that you wouldn't actually imagine, especially coming on sort of like the last couple of corners. It's kind of cool. You don't realize it kind of dips down, and I don't know that affects drivers. I'm not a driver, but it was pretty cool. And I think having it at the Hard Rock and making it a bit more accessible to people from Miami, and certainly to Fort Lauderdale as well, just north of Miami, means that Formula E will have a decent home there. And I think it's been reported, I think Alberto Longo was saying that it's a multi-year deal. So I think it's definitely a good sort of home that Formula E need in America, because since New York came off the calendar, we've had Portland, which was, a couple of years, and we've had Homestead, which didn't really work out. So hopefully this is a positive thing for them. I know you spoke to Alberto a little bit earlier, Nick. What else was he saying about this calendar?
So as you said, yes, Alberto Longo, the championship's co-founder, did confirm that this Miami deal to use the Miami International Autodrome, of course, was the home to the Miami Grand Prix for Formula One, is a multi-year deal. The drivers, as you mentioned, who attended the Evo Sessions event, loved it and were kind of hoping, can we use this place instead of Homestead? Because as you mentioned, Homestead wasn't particularly close to the center of Miami. It was a good 45-minute plus drive, taking traffic into account. The venue itself was it's an incredible venue. It really, really was, and so cool to see Formula E there. It just didn't quite work, for a few reasons, whereas the Miami International Autodrome should be, I think, touch wood, really, really good. The drivers did say that maybe some tweaks should be made to the circuit to make it a little bit longer, because of course for the Evo Sessions event, FE didn't use the full F1 layout, so to speak. Maybe we could use some more of it for next season. I think would be something perhaps to be looked into. But yeah, so Alberto Longo did confirm that yes, it's a multi-year deal, so this means that it will be obviously on the calendar for Gen 4, which is really critical actually, in all fairness, but also the fact that we have got 2 TBCs on the calendar, and it's been widely reported by the majority of publications that one of them will be a return to Sanya in China. The other looks like it's actually going to be to continue racing in the Indonesian capital of Jakarta. And Alberto, very confident that both are going to happen. So that's good news, because obviously we've seen in the past that when there's been a TBC to be confirmed on the calendar, unfortunately 9 times out of 10, they tend to get cancelled and not happen, which then creates massive gaps in the calendar. So the fact that Alberto is confident is very, very good. So yes, it looks like we'll also be going to Sanya and Jakarta. Again, time will tell, because that will be confirmed at a later date at an additional FIA World Motorsport, that's a new one, World Motorsport Council meeting. But I'm a big fan of this calendar. I've got to give FE credit, because you mentioned there as well about Formula One and how they've started to really group races together more based on the continent. That's very, very clear in FE's calendar, a record-breaking calendar as well, featuring across 12 venues, 18 rounds. That's the most FE has ever had, so it's a record-breaking one. But yeah, for me, Miami's a real standout. I'm so intrigued how we're going to perform there, and I'm very excited. I think that's one the fans in particular, given it's in January, there's nothing else going on, should definitely tune into.
Yeah, so the calendar starts later this year, and there are clashes, and maybe you can give a bit more insight into this in just a second, Nick, as we finish off. But it starts in Sao Paulo, Brazil on the 6th of December, 2025, going on to Mexico, and then Miami in January, with a Saudi Arabian doubleheader, as always, across the Valentine's weekend. So a lot of unhappy partners of people working in Formula E, although a lot of people in motorsport seem to have made people who they work with their partners, because they're always on the road. So maybe that's not so bad. That's the 13th and 14th of February. There is a bit of a gap after the Jarama race. That's 21st of March. to then go to Germany, to Berlin. That's a sort of several week, I think maybe 6-week gap there till the 2nd and 3rd of May. Then we have Monaco, another double header in Monaco. Good to see that that's back. I actually enjoyed the double header. I was a little bit skeptical at first that 2 races in Monaco didn't really work, but I enjoyed it this time around. We then have the to be confirmed races, the 30th of May, believed to be in China, in Sanya. China, having just been there with Formula E, is such an important market. You know, most like mopeds go past you, and none of them were kind of combustion engine. They were all electric. And some of the electric car brands out there and what they're doing and the quality of vehicles that they're making for a fraction of the cost of what we make here in the West is absolutely ridiculous. And I know that, you know, Jeff Dodds, the CEO of Formula E, is desperate to get a Chinese manufacturer embedded into Formula E because it's such a great fit and a good opportunity for both. We then have the 20th of June, which is, we think, Jakarta potentially next year. Just a single header, another sweaty race. And then we have 3 double headers to end the season. China in Shanghai in China, 4th and 5th of July. Then we have Tokyo, which is a lot later this year, back in July, 25th and 26th of July. And then the finale in London at the Excel Centre. That deal was extended to the end of the Gen 3 Evo era, which this will be. And that is a lot later as well, as we go into August, the 15th and 16th of August. And I know that we have 18 races next year. You would imagine that maybe if one of those to be confirmed races doesn't happen, but the other one does, maybe that will become a double header so that there is, you know, the full complement of races. I know that in the future, in the Gen 4 era, which I think we're going to get maybe a bit of a tease of the Gen 4 era this week. So, you know, make sure keep an eye on Formula E's social media and also talkSPORT Driving YouTube channel. Jeff Dodds wants 21 races across 16 different locations, I think was what he told me. So we're going to see a lot of change in Formula E in the next few years, and I'm absolutely here for it. Nick, thank you very much for joining me today. As I say, keep an eye out for Racing News 365 for all of Nick's great writing, and I'm sure you'll be fully across the Canadian Grand Prix this weekend. And also keep your eyes out for these calendars, the Formula 1 calendar that we talked about earlier, and also the Formula E calendar, and the Gen 4 teaser from Formula E, which is definitely coming out sometime this week. Keep an eye out for that because it's seriously impressive, and I think the new Gen 4 car is going to be a piece of kit that you want to watch. This has been On Track here on talkSPORT 2. Don't forget you can catch this show if you missed any of it on the talkSPORT Podcast Network and also the talkSPORT Driving YouTube channel.